Commissioner Brown.
Present.
Carter.
Present.
Little.
Present.
Underwood Jacobs. Present. Velasquez. Present. Chairman Vieira.
Present.
We have a quorum.
You could please stand and join me in saluting our flag. Place your right hand over your heart. Ready? Begin.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on the agenda. No presentations at the beginning here. Public business from the floor, agendized items. I have no cards for agendized items. So
Speaker cards.
Speaker cards. So we'll move on to the consent calendar, which is the approval of the minutes. But Brett, I noticed that it doesn't appear that we have a quorum of those that would be able to vote on the minutes. So
That's correct.
if we could go ahead and just postpone that and bring it back at the next Criminal Justice Commission.
Sure.
Okay. And then new business, item 1, disposition of juvenile citations, absence of juvenile traffic court in the Antelope Valley. Mr. Dorico, good morning.
Morning, sir. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Chairman Vieira, new faces on the commission. We all know each other, which is good, great. Some great folks, exciting last night getting you folks here. Dr. Brown, good to see you again, sir. Good to see you. Okay. What I'm bringing to you today, excuse me, I didn't mean good to see you too. What I'm bringing forward today is issues regarding the juvenile traffic court. Now, when we talk about juvenile traffic court, that goes beyond the reach of just traffic issues. That juvenile court also handled other infractions as well as municipal code violations for truancy or curfew, daytime loitering, those issues. Also, some low-level misdemeanors that were diverted to that court. For 2 years now, we have had no presence in the juvenile traffic court in the Antelope Valley. And all those cases, as the deputies or law enforcement or CHP or any enforcement agency is issuing a citation, that citations are being forwarded to a probation department unit down in Van Nuys for the probation's juvenile diversion unit. Now, just to give you some ideas, some numbers, that varies. The court here locally was handling anywhere between 10,000 to 14,000 cases per year. It varied, so it was very significant. So if you think about the impact and things we talk about continually here in the Crime Commission is what issues do we see that may be driving some of the quality of life issues we have in the community and driving our crime rate, and we talk about that a lot here. So what my idea to do at this point is bring certain things to light each meeting that we believe are creating issues for us as it relates to driving some of our crime numbers, how we can work collectively as a group and bring some remedy to that and solutions as a group to bring forward to the council and to the community. If you think about that number, I mean, that's an impossible number. And the state, what happened is, the history of it is the state took over the courts locally and in the county 2 years ago. At that point, and as well as you probably well know, that there was significant budget cuts as it related to that takeover. So they probably lost about 30% of the clerks and support unit at the local courthouse, both in adult and juvenile, and then they eliminate courts throughout the county. Okay, obviously, based on priority of cases and severity of crimes, that's how they made determinations on what courts were kept and what was left over and for consideration for release. Our juvenile traffic court was one of the first things that went. It was actually run by a commissioner who's now the representative for probation in that diversion program. But what they're looking for is they're looking for assistance for us as a community to have more ways to divert these juveniles into more of a restorative justice model. We already have a juvenile community youth court here that we run. We also run a teen court here through the city of Lancaster. And what we're looking for is more opportunities for that recommendation from that unit to be able to divert more cases to our area for that restorative justice model. I can give you an idea. They're so inundated. If you think about that, we're one court, Antelope Valley, with those kind of numbers. If you can think of that on a countywide basis, how significant that could be, as that contributes to numbers we have throughout the county. So I think what I'm asking for today is just some consideration to bring some ideas forward to the commission, okay, that we need to be open. If it comes to be determined by the commission that what we need is some political empowerment to get a juvenile youth court traffic court back here in our area, then if we can apply that pressure and see if that's something that's even attainable. But in the interim, we need to do something, okay, as we work through these programs, through proactive diversion and trying to get down to what the causes are for crime in our community. This obviously, it doesn't benefit us to go out, spend resources to commit the Sheriff's Department, the Highway Patrol, tie up the court system in a system that does have no accountability on the end. So some of these cases are taking 7 or 8 months before there's any action by that unit based on the numbers they're dealing with, and it's not their fault. I mean, it's just a crazy amount of activity and caseload to do something with that individual. So we need something that's more expeditious. So I'm probably going to be talking to Captain Nelson, too, about more diversion into our community youth court and expansion of that court, especially with this truancy model that we're putting in place, and hopefully have approval from the school board on the 20th. That's going to create some load on that as well, but again, it's more of a proactive model on a local level. Okay, so I'm going to actually ask Mr. Foray to come speak to this group, with your permission, next month, to talk about some of the issues that they're dealing with, specifically the kind of cases they need our help with to manage here locally for our local youth that are creating some of these issues. That's it. Any questions?
Thank you, Lee. I think it's a great idea. I think when we have these issues in our own community, if we don't address them, they're not going to get addressed. So get on the front side of that, and taking a look at the resources and the capacities of what we can do I'm looking forward to what you're bringing to us. So,
thank you. All right, thank you very much.
I'm going to go ahead and talk just a little bit out of turn. I was going to wait till the commissioners' comments, but I do want to extend a warm welcome to 3 of our new commissioners, for those of you who may not know them. And so I'm going to start with my left, and I'm going to allow them an opportunity at the end of the meeting, if they want to make comments, to go ahead and make comments. But Sheldon Carter, welcome. Thank you. And Mr. Jeff Little to my right. Thank you. And to his right, Ms. Angela Underwood. Let me look at this. Jacobs. I'm sorry. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Having said that, we'll go ahead and move on. So with commission staff presentations, updates, and reports, monthly crime stats, Mr. Jim Cobalt.
Thank you, Chairman Vieira and Commissioners. The measurement period for this report is July 29th through August 2nd of 2014. These are the numbers that for both crimes and arrests and report numbers issued for those 5 weeks. The issue with these particular numbers is we can start to see a few weeks where we're getting into the 80s and 90s, and that's 80 Part 1s to 90 Part 1s per week, and that's a range that we really don't want to get into. When we compare the average and medians of Part 1 crimes between our July 2014 report and our August 2014 report, during last month's report, we were at 79.25 average Part 1s per week, with a weekly median of 78. During this report, we're at 83.6 Part 1s per week, and with a weekly median of 80. When we take a look at we compare month to month for a 12-month period. The red or the red graph up there is for the most current 12 months. The blue is for the previous 12 months. When we compare August to August, we're up 6%. When we calculate our crime rate based upon the last 12 months, we're sitting right now at about 274 and change, and that's roughly where we were at the end of last year. I think the issue that you might want to be aware of is that we're sitting at 412. Actually, this morning it was revised to 410 Part 1 crimes for the month of July. That's the highest that we've been since May of 2010. So it's one of those things that we probably ought to keep an eye on. When we take a look at the most active reporting districts for Part 1 crimes, they're listed up here along with their frequencies. When we take a look at that on the map, again, we go back to what we've identified and kind of see repetitively over and over and over again. The 4 primary areas where where we seem to have the highest density of Part 1 crimes is 20th Street East and Avenue J, and a little bit to the east of there, a little bit to the west of there. The area from Lancaster Boulevard basically up to Avenue I, 10th Street West and Avenue J, and Valley Central Way. And those reporting districts that are listed here touch every one of those areas. For residential burglary, these are the data for residential burglary during the measurement period. You can see 1135 led the way. That's on the north end of that 20th and 20th Street East and Avenue J area. 1137 is a little bit south of that, and so on and so forth through the rest of the reporting districts. When we look at larcenies involving vehicles, we can see that the larcenies involving vehicles cover pretty much the same area. When we take a look at the 52-week trend starting in August of 2013, or August 4th of 2013, going up to August 2nd of 2014, if we look at the crimes trending up first, we can see assault has a rather distinctive upward trend. We're getting close to the baseline. Baseline for assaults on Lancaster is about 15.09 per week. You can see, again, we're getting fairly close to that, and we've got the upward trajectory going. When you take a look at the density for assaults around Lancaster, it doesn't vary much from those areas that we just identified. We look at larcenies that are trending upward or also trending upward. You can see back in when you take a look at this graph, the most recent week is on the right of the graph as you look at it. The 52 weeks ago is on the left as you look at it. You can see larceny was doing pretty good as far as being low in frequency up to about roughly the first of the year, and we start to see kind of a moving up of the overall range of larcenies, and that's probably the crime that's most driving our crime rate. So when we take a look at that, that's our highest frequency crime, and so that's one of the things that is really driving it. It's important to keep it in context. It's not necessarily the robberies or the other auto thefts and things like that. In fact, we're going to see some good numbers for that here in a second. We just need to know those petty thefts, those small, really quality of life crimes are the things that are spiking this right now. When we take a look at where they're distributed for this reporting period around the city, again, you can see the 20th Street East and Avenue J. You can see the brown density up there around Lancaster Boulevard, 10th Street West and Avenue J, and over towards Valley Central Way. Take a look at homicides. We're down over this 52-week period, and we're actually trending flat. When we take a look at trending down crimes, you can see rape is a distinctive downward trend. Robbery has a distinctive downward trend. You can see when you take a look at robbery here, you can see that we've almost shifted our range from the early weeks in this reporting period. You can see our ranges were running from between 4 and 10 per week. We've shifted down now to between 4 and 8 per week. So that's a good shift in our range, and that shows positive activity in this crime. Residential burglary as a whole is also showing a downward trend, although we do see that we're losing some of the weeks where we have a really low number. You can see in the more recent weeks over here, in the earlier part of this range, we had some weeks where we were below 8. We average about 23.55 burglaries in Lancaster per year. We had some really good weeks at the beginning of and towards the middle of this. While our range is not spiking as high over here in the most recent weeks, we're also losing the bottom as well. So the range is tightening up just a little bit. As far as grand theft auto, you can see a really good decline there. Grand theft auto things are looking very good in that particular crime. When we take a look at arson, it's important to understand there are 3 crimes that are very low frequency for us: murder, rape, and arson. And you can see arson is showing a good downward trend there. But again, you're looking at, we average 1.07 arsons per week in Lancaster. This is how crimes lay out across the city in this particular reporting district, or in this particular reporting period. When you take a look at it for the new commissioners up there, the areas that are red are reporting districts that have, in this reporting period, 26 or more Part 1 crimes. The areas in the orange have 16 to 25 Part 1 crimes. The reporting districts in yellow have 11 to 15 Part 1 crimes, and then everything 10 or below is in the green. These, and you have a copy of this in front of you, these are the locations that have our most frequent calls for service on here. Probably the locations that are fairly new to the list, starting from the bottom and working up, would be the Lido Estates, Mobile Home Parks, Granada Villas. Sometimes they're on, sometimes they're off, they're back on. And the Beechwood Apartments have not been on there during the most recent reporting periods, and they've popped on there. When you take a look at the distribution of the highest frequency calls for service across the city, you can see, or this is how they lay out. And then this is our crime forecast for August of 2014. We're forecasting 371 Part 1 crimes during this time, and these are the reporting districts that will have the lowest to highest range of Part 1 crimes. For our July forecast, we forecasted 351, and they hit us with about 400. There's 412 listed here. Again, that's been adjusted down to 410. That gave us, with the 412, gave us a crime accuracy rate of about 85%. And that's all I have.
With respect to you mentioned that larceny had the highest frequency this month. Is there any indication as to the age group of the individuals committing the larceny and the time of day? Was there something that you can correlate with
that? That really depends. When you get on the west side of town, the people who get arrested for that crime tend to be a little older. The people on the east side of town, like if you get over to, let's use Walmart for example, Walmart tends to have more juveniles arrested and more folks that are into, let's say, below 25 category. You get over to the east side of town, the west side of town, and you tend to get a little older. In fact, I just did an analysis of the folks arrested down on the Lancaster Boulevard during their most recent month, and the average age of the person arrested down there was 49. Okay. So it really depends on what part of the city that you're in.
I see.
And just to comment on this, to give perspective too on some of these, like for aggravated assaults, let's say we have a shooting at an inhabited dwelling, and there's one suspect, but there could have been 10 people in the house. You have to stat that 10 times. Okay, so it's not indicative of an actual incident. It's indicative of what's mandatory reporting is on those. Again, having your larcenies and petty thefts being part of your Part 1 rate is an interesting thing when you look at the totality of crimes.
Right.
But the point being, again, for us, as you can see, robberies was an issue for us earlier in the year, and Captain Nelson has put a lot of resources to managing that issue, and that team's done a heck of a job. We've done the same thing with burglaries. But we're going to suffer in other areas, possibly, when we do those type of things in target operations. The other thing is, these are historically our busiest months of the year, and that's the reality of it. And then as now school started again, we're going to see other issues as it's related to that, but some of these other things are going to remedy themselves.
Okay, great. I mean, it was very good to hear that, murder, rape, and arson were down. So just curious about the larceny.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, Mr. Kumar, on these figures, I'm looking at the east side in that area. Is the increase in that 6%? Would you say that concentrated in that east side area corridor?
Well, what you have to understand is we have 4 primary generators of crime as far as locations go. Those 4 primary areas are Avenue J from Challenger Way over to 20th Street East, the Lancaster Boulevard area from Lancaster Boulevard up to Avenue I, roughly around the 10th Street West area, and then 10th Street West and Avenue J and Valley Central Way. That's where you see the increase in the crime. That's where, if there is an increase, crime across the rest of the city is pretty random. And that makes it very difficult for the Sheriff's Department to be able to plan for that. But we do have 4 areas that we know from month to month that this is where the crime is going to occur. If we focus our attention on those 4 areas, we can bring the crime rate down. But if we go other places where it's occurring randomly, the effectiveness rate, just by virtue of the fact that it's random, is going to be much less effective. So those 4 areas, if we focus on those 4 areas, we can control the crime rate. If we get random about it, random patrol gives random results. It always has.
And the reality is those areas have been identified in the past. That's part of our business improvement group program that we have. That's specifically that area falls in one of our districts there. So we've been working very closely with our retail centers and everything in that area. But we have a high density of multi-family housing in that area too as well that has created some issues for us.
Having sat on the Antelope Valley Sheriff Board for over 10 years and listening and seeing what takes place and the incredible job that the captain has done and the staff at the Sheriff's Department, they've got their hands full and continually doing it. Lee, I agree. It's incredible what you all do. So.
Just a quick question. In regards to larceny, stating that year over year, historically, the month of August seems to be a bit higher than the other months. And you mentioned children returning to school and things of that sort, but what other factors do you see attribute to the spike in August?
The big thing that we could do, in fact, that's our focus for the Business Improvement Group meetings this month, and that is to get patrons in these who park their vehicles in these large parking lots to hide their valuables and lock their car. I mean, if you could sit with me someday when I go through the crime reports, and you could see the number of vehicles that have been broken into, not because somebody smashed the window, not because somebody ripped the door off, but because they didn't lock their car. People think they're safe in their driveway. No. You have to lock your car in your driveway, too. But the thing about it is you go through these reports and you'll consistently see either they didn't lock their car or they were sure that they locked their car, but the deputy stands there and there's no signs of forced entry into the vehicle. And it's a 20,000 or 2,000 or newer vehicle, and the days of entering those vehicles with a coat hanger is pretty much over with. So, I mean, obviously, maybe they slipped up and they don't remember not locking it, but when you take a look at that, I used to report on that regularly to the Criminal Justice Commission, but it got repetitive. 70% of our vehicle larcenies, the people don't lock their cars.
Thank you.
With respect to the juvenile offenses and the high-density crime areas, how many are repeat offenders with respect to the larceny that are offending in that period, that extended period we have now that you talked about earlier, because we don't have a juvenile court?
The vast majority, I mean, this is where the opportunity exists for what Mr. DeRico is talking about. The vast majority of the kids that we arrest over on the east side are first-time offenders. The second largest group of people that we arrest in the city of Lancaster are first-time offenders. The largest group of people that we arrest in Lancaster are people who have a prior criminal record and are not currently on any kind of probation or parole. Those range about in the low 40s of what we arrest. The second largest group that we arrest are first-time offenders. And that's particularly true over on the east side. And that's where a court like Mr. DeRico is talking about, or some type of hearing process like he's talking about, would greatly benefit us, because those are the children that we probably want to try to do something with.
Thank you, Mr. Covell.
Mr. Vieira, Lee, can you explain to the people at home in regards to the Part 1 crimes what they are and how they're counted and what they mean?
Well, I can tell you that they're in a category, and actually it's advertised as they come out, but most of in our first categories are obviously homicide. There's a hierarchy through it. Aggravated assaults, rapes, arsons, it's progressive. Then you have your theft crimes that are inclusive of robberies all the way down to petty thefts that are a part of that area, and then auto thefts and them are separated out. But these are classified through the FBI Mandatory Reporting Statistical Guide as considered Part 1 crimes, and probably rated basically on what has the most impact on your communities and your highest frequency of issues. And so there's a mandatory formula that's required by the FBI on reporting out, and that's what you guys see regularly through the stats that are brought forward here. And again, today, those are on Glean stats. That's on our latest update, but as the captain's staff, that comes from patrol, what the patrol deputies write based on a statistical code in their earned file system, through the detectives, and then how that case is actually managed on the end. And sometimes there's issues related to that based on basic elements of crime or the ability to prosecute someone, but when that information is cleaned out, then that's reported to the FBI in that statistical mindset of Part 1 crimes. And so there's some that I don't agree with, I'll be honest with you. I mean, this one right here, where entry's unknown on a vehicle like the one Jim talks about, that's the one that makes me crazy. Okay? We have no forced entry. We have nothing to establish that the car was actually burglarized. It might have merely been left unlocked. And then what was stolen sometimes out of these things is loose change in the center console or some small item out of that. I mean, by element alone, burglary to a vehicle is an exception based on what the elements of a crime are for burglary. But we have to statistically identify that. The same thing with larcenies. Larcenies is another one. You have some zero-tolerance shopping centers, which we want them to have an active crime prevention, loss prevention model in there, and that's what we worked on a couple of years ago through the commission and actually met with those large box retailers. But again, the more focused, the more frequency we're going to apprehend people, that drives some of our numbers too as well. So it's all perspective. I will tell you that, for the amount of calls for service that we're managing in our city, as well as the amount of resources that we have, significant resources out there, the deputies, especially under the issues they've had for the last several years with budget cuts and exclusion of overtime and all those things, we as a city have stepped up to that and managed that difference and I think we've done a really good job with the amount of resources that we have. But again, part of what I'm talking about is I brought up the thing with the juvenile court issue. I'm going to go beyond that with all the things that I believe are impacting us that we have no control over as a community that have been dealt to us, that our law enforcement officials and the district attorney and everyone are having to deal with, okay, and have an impact on some of this. Mr. Carter, I totally agree with you. If we're not addressing this issue immediately and there's some restorative mindset and accountability, that person's going to proliferate. They're not caught. I know that. Things my parents wanted to counsel me about, I probably would do that again, okay? But when I got in trouble for it, significantly, I never thought about doing it again. It's just the mindset of a juvenile especially. So got off topic there, sorry, Marvin, but it's an interesting study. It's something people should know. And then again, as I used the example earlier of shooting at them, it's not always indicative of what is actually taking place based on the reporting. I think the biggest thing is if we impact an area and it feels more inviting, right? We've raised that standard of quality of living in an area, because you would be surprised the number of crime rates as we compare ourselves to other cities that we historically thought were safe cities that would have that feel, have higher crime rates than we do. So it's perspective based on those numbers. You got to look at what the numbers are. I agree, aggravated assaults has been an issue this year countywide. This is not just not involving our city. It's been recognized it's an issue this year. But those assaults are considered down to even a simple battery. Okay, any offensive touching. So that's a large category for something that's considered an assaults.
Mr. Dorico, as far as the large retail operations, are they following through with what they need to do as far as making sure that they're doing everything humanly possible to make it, instead of relying on the sheriff's department to handle everything, once they make that call, are they making sure that they're doing what they need to do to make sure that these individuals are prosecuted or following track?
Well, I can say this to you, that there's still a couple we have issue with that don't really have much of a loss prevention policy, and they blame that on potential litigation if they confront someone, because there's been issues. Then we have great cooperation with, like, Walmart. Target is a fine example for how they manage their loss prevention, as we determined by meeting with them. And then we've made them inclusive in these groups with our smaller moms and pops types operation and single place businesses, to help them as well, to work them together more of a kind of in a business neighborhood watch mindset. But they have stepped up to the plate. Walmart has a contract even through the city with the sheriff's department to have a deputy in that center over there, and Gateway Plaza as well on the east side. Again, there's just that one stands out to me just because the amount of density that's around it. We have significant population numbers around that center. But yes and no. Most of them have bought on and are heavily involved and have put resources to bear, and then there's a couple that still have not.
Just one final question for me. If you could extract, and I don't know if you've done this in your statistical calculations or not, but if you could extract those reported crimes that are less than clearly articulated, what effect would that have on your statistics?
Well, that's something we're working through a process now. The captain can probably answer that, but in light of some recent things that came out of the media, too, that's kind of a touchy subject right now. And now we're managing that, but go ahead, Pat.
I can tell you, any time that a statistical code is used by a deputy in the field based on his initial assessment of a crime, for instance, and I'll just use Lee's example of a car burglary. In many instances, if the victim is adamant that the car was locked and there's no explanation for how a suspect got into the car, it appropriately is reported as a car burglary, which makes it a felony as opposed to a petty theft type larceny out of an unlocked car. There may, however, become additional information come to light at some point further down, where the suspect is captured, for instance, and admits that, yeah, I stole stuff out of these 4 cars, for instance, but in each instance the car was unlocked. That may end up being one of those situations where it's appropriate to change the statistical code from a burglary to a larceny from a vehicle. Those types of reviews are conducted all the time, and that's why there's always some change in the stats from the original reports to the time that they're actually officially reported as Part 1 crimes to the FBI. And that may come from a variety of instances. For instance, a burglary of a residence may more appropriately be described as a theft if ultimately during the investigation you find out, for instance, it was a house guest that stole your ring that you don't miss for a week. So even though initially the deputy is being given a set of circumstances that would indicate a residential burglary occurred, subsequent investigation may change that to the fact that it was actually a theft from inside the house by a house guest or a maid or whatever the case may be. So there are a lot of options and changes that may occur. And there's also those instances where the deputies, because we have a code book that has literally hundreds of statistical codes, that they just get it wrong. The watch sergeant reviews each report that's written and is to check things, everything from the accuracy of the narrative of the report right down to the statistical codes and the reporting districts so that we have accurate ideas of where crimes are occurring and what they are. So if the watch sergeant, for some reason, doesn't catch that the wrong statistical code was used, then it also is reviewed by the detective bureau sergeant and ultimately the detective that the case is assigned to. Anywhere along that line, a mistake may be, or a more appropriate statistical code may be replacing the original code. Again, so there's a lot of variance that occurs over the first few days of a case that may affect, at least temporarily, the stats. Did that answer the question?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dorico. Seeing no other questions, we're going to move on to arrest stats by LA County Sheriff's Department. And it's Deputy Miguel Ruiz.
Good morning, members of the Commission. I'm Deputy Miguel Ruiz from Lancaster Station Community Relations. The information I'm going to share with you is specifically focused on 3 specific teams at Lancaster Station. We have other arrest stats that are being done by the field units, but I'm just focusing on the numbers that are specific for these 3 teams that we're going to review real quick. The first team is our burglary suppression team, and I have a month-to-month comparison from June until July, so you can kind of identify if there's an increase from one month to the other. The specific category we're talking about first is going to be the felony arrest. In June, we had 25. July, last month, you could tell we had 18, so there's a decrease there. Parolees arrested, that's the number of parolees that were arrested in that felony arrest category. So of those 25 in June, there were 6 of them that were actually parolees. In July, there were 18. Search warrants, they were about the same, 11 and 10. Warrants arrest, and those are specific individuals that were arrested because they had warrants, was 10 and 3, so there was a decrease in July. It's kind of significant also with a couple drops with the number of 18 felony arrests also. Ramey warrants, those are warrants that are, for the burglary suppression team specifically, those are warrants that suspects have been identified through evidence, whether a license plate from a burglary was in the report, or there was fingerprints lifted, or some other means that the investigators had identified a specific named suspect for a report, but that arrest was not made yet. So in the month of June, they identified 4, and most likely those 4 are probably in the 18 arrest felony stats. And then in July, we have 16 yet to be arrested. But I'm pretty confident in August they'll be arrested. Or if not, as we speak, they probably are already in the system. The value of stolen real property that was recovered in the month of June was $19,592, and in the month of July it was $9,210. And that will vary depending on electronics or the value of items. So obviously, it's not always the quantity of items that were stolen. Sometimes it's just the actual value. You know, big screen TVs cost a whole lot more than maybe somebody's backpack or some other equipment. LANCAP team is the other team that we are going to focus on. Felony arrest also is another category. 55 in the month of July compared to 62 in the month of June. One side note that I do want to emphasize also of significance with the LANCAP team, compounded with the burglary suppression team, the robbery suppression team, of a specific incident that you might be aware of that happened on the 29th of June, where there was a home invasion robbery in Lancaster, where an elderly woman, 60-year-old, well, I wouldn't call her elderly, that's still pretty young, 60-year-old woman and her son. I'm hitting 40, so I can see it right there. Please let me correct that. There was a home invasion robbery where they were actually held at gunpoint by 2, turned out to be 2 juveniles, but they were wearing ski masks and they were armed, with loaded handguns and held them at gunpoint. They took some televisions and they took their vehicle, a Hyundai Sonata, and drove down to what we ultimately discovered was in the city of Van Nuys, around 5:30 in the morning. Our robbery suppression team was quickly on the investigation in cooperation with the Hyundai Corporation, because it was a Hyundai Sonata that was stolen. They had a tracking system very similar to OnStar. They were very instrumental, the corporation was, as well as the investigative techniques to locate that Hyundai in a residence in Van Nuys. The LANCAP team also quickly deployed with the cooperation of LAPD, finding the actual vehicle there. We set up a observation of the vehicle, began to move, ironically, with the suspects, which ultimately led to the arrest of both those suspects, the recovery of the handguns, the recovery of the ski mask, and the recovery of the stolen televisions. So this is just, to highlight, how good our teams really are, amongst many other things that I can go on pages and pages of other things, but this is just a real good example of many of the things of their hard work and dedication to help with these numbers. Anyways, I continue on. Our narcotics team is another team that we focus on. We give statistics to a monthly basis. June and July comparison, you can see a huge increase of felony arrests from 8 to 17. Meth measured in grams. In June, it was only 11 grams of methamphetamine. In July, there was a huge increase of 118.65. Marijuana also, even though there was only 29,000 grams in the month of June and only almost 5,000 in the month of July, there was, in addition to that, they also had a huge marijuana grow bust, where 139 plants were recovered in the month of July. So that would actually increase that in grams, but we didn't want to manufacture it or break it down or cut it up or anything like that, so we just counted them as plants. Activity and search warrants also, they jumped and doubled in activity from the month of June to July to 12, and firearms that were recovered was 1 and 2. One other side note, also in the month of July, we're proud to announce that our Antelope Valley softball team, our sheriff's team, won the Guns N' Hoses charity softball tournament, which benefit the High Desert Fallen Heroes fund out here, which benefits the family members, the wives or husbands and children of fallen law enforcement officers throughout the Antelope Valley. And it's a charity that stays local out here. It was very hot. I'll admit I was there. We competed against the California Highway Patrol. Very good adversary to play against, and then we also beat California Department of Corrections and ultimately won the championship game against AMR. So we're very proud of that. Now, that's actually our second year in a row that we won it, and I think we won it, 4 times within the last 7 years. I don't want to brag too much, but we're happy about that. A couple other outreach programs I want to inform you of also is tomorrow we have our monthly Coffee with the Deputy program. It's an outreach program that we do here at the Lemon Leaf Cafe every Thursday, or that second Thursday of every month. You're more than welcome to come. We open up to the residents in the area from 8 o'clock in the morning until about 10, where we listen to some of their requests or some of the issues that they may personally have. Neighbors come and talk about some of the complaints. It could be as little as dog barking, issues with neighbors, or as severe as, they have information about some drug trafficking in their neighborhood that they're concerned about, or any sort of gang activity that they suspect in their neighborhood. And we focus on those and most likely direct one of these patrol units or these teams towards those type of things. Another thing that we did in cooperation with the city is a emergency preparation expo, as well as which is in conjunction with the National Night Out just this past week. So we do those type of things, as well as the Neighborhood Watch, which we help the city out with immensely. And there's a whole bunch of other outreach programs that we do that benefit, and that's just a couple of things I want to inform you of that we have coming up. If there's any questions?
I don't have any.
In your statistics, I saw a correlation between the increase in gun seizure and the increase in drug seizure.
Yes, sir.
Are those being correlated and then rolled up to higher level organizational type crime?
Are you referring to it's consistent with gangs arming themselves, or
Or just
Trying to find-
trafficking organizations arming themselves?
Well, it's not unusual that when we find drug dealers or drug locations that the suspects are armed. It's pretty consistent with the increased amount of drugs that we do get, but it's not always, there's not like an exact ratio of how many that we find most of the time, but it's pretty common. Does that answer your question as far as, you're trying to see if there's a direct correlation with an increase of drug arrest or drug confiscated with increases in weapons, right?
Correct.
Okay. Most of the time is the best way I can say that. Some of the other statistics that I show in there is drug recovery, as far as like the LANCAP team or the burglary team. Some of those are just stolen weapons. In fact, more often than not, they're normally stolen when they're recovered from a seizure or a warrant. The LANCAP team also, when they would make an arrest, for example, if it's pulling over a vehicle and it's probably a parolee with a gun, there won't necessarily be drugs related to that, but that would still go in the category of a gun being recovered. And I think my captain might have some more information on that also.
It's very common, obviously, to recover firearms at the locations of those involved in trafficking of narcotics because they have to protect their stash from other drug dealers and persons who would steal from them forcibly. The other firearms statistics that Mike was referring to are often firearms that were stolen in burglaries, for instance, from homes, and ultimately would end up in either a gang member's hand or a dope dealer's hands, and they were recovered at some point prior to that occurring. But it's drugs for sale and firearms go very much hand in hand, and always have. I don't know if that helps or not, but it doesn't necessarily correlate to a drug trafficking organization, if that's where your question was headed.
That was the higher level question was, is it indicative of something bigger? Because usually the drugs you see on the street, that's the hand. The head is somewhere else. And if the increase, if they were correlated and you could follow and you can track that, maybe eventually you get to the head. It's kind of how I was looking at it.
It's difficult to correlate recoveries of firearms with their source because they're frequently stolen. Very few of them are actually where the drug dealer walks into your average sporting goods store and buys a pistol and does all the required paperwork and all the things and all of the hoops that you have to jump through in California to possess a firearm. Obviously, those are ignored. And there's really no correlation to say that it's a drug trafficking organization because firearms were recovered, or even high-end firearms were recovered because most of them were stolen to begin with. And even a guy who's cooking methamphetamine on his stovetop will frequently be armed in order to protect that stash from theft.
Thank you, Deputy Ruiz. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And now from the California Highway Patrol update, Officer Gil Hernandez, welcome.
Welcome. Good morning, everyone. Just bringing some update information. As year to date, we've had an increase of 38% enforcement contacts. That includes citations, verbal warnings, and fix-it tickets. Overall, our fatal traffic collisions are down by 30%. Our DUI arrests are up by 31%. And just for information for this coming weekend, being that we do have our DUI arrests, we are going to be saturating the Antelope Valley on Saturday with approximately 12 units out there, additional to what we already have deployed. And this is going to be a task force that is statewide, and LA County specific. We have our own task force here. This coming Saturday is going to be the Antelope Valley. So we will be out there. We will be reporting statistics on Monday as to how many arrests. Obviously, the task force is going to be primarily focused on impaired drivers, removing those drivers from the road, and but doesn't preclude them from having warrants or any other type of arrest out there. So I will be out there with some media outlets reporting so the outcome of that. So it'll be a very interesting night, to say the least. Additionally, I want to report on the recruitment efforts that we've had. We had an open application process in July. From there, we have obtained over 2,000 applications for LA County. 15% was LA from the statewide application process. So still our main issue is the main qualifications or the primary skill that people are missing is real-life experience. In other words, our applicants do not have any type of experience when they go to the panel and tell them why they want to be a CHP officer. So we're still faced with that challenge. And that's pretty much all I have for you today.
Comments or questions? Aaron, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And from District Attorney update, Mr. Stephen Franklin.
Good morning. The filing statistics for the Antelope Valley, and again, it's for the entire Antelope Valley, it's just not for Lancaster, so obviously it's going to include Palmdale. But we filed in July 400 felony complaints, and that's on par with LAX, the airport court, and Van Nuys. San Fernando filed 442 to kind of put that into perspective. As far as misdemeanors, in the month of July again, we filed 680 misdemeanors, and that's Compton filed 720, LAX 567. So again, it's all pretty much on the comparable scale. So year to date, we've filed 2,317 felonies. And for misdemeanors, again, year to date, it's been 4,338. Just a couple other brief comments. I'm glad to see that we're going to be doing a DUI check on Saturday, and obviously we work very well with CHP and get all our cooperation, so good hunting on that. And then finally, there's been some comments on the larceny driving up statistics, and I just point this out. It's going to be interesting to monitor. I don't know if it's going to come into play or not, but rape, robbery, Resberg, those are down. That's interesting because those are cases that you can go to state prison on, real state prison. Larceny, for the most part, probably 90% of larcenies themselves are no longer state prison eligible. They're going to be local county time. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on that and see if AB 109 has in fact is one of the reasons for the upward swing, because these robberies, when LANCAP does these great sting, they do just great, fabulous work. They get some real substantial prison time, and of course we're not going to get that on larcenies. But the problem is, there's not even the threat of prison right now. So, and that concludes my report.
Interesting point. We'll have to keep an eye on that.
Yes, sir.
Seeing nothing else, public safety update, Mr. Dorico.
Thank you, Dr. Vieira. With your permission, I'd like to have Jim give a quick update on the Business Improvement Group program, and then I'll go into their public safety.
With regard to the Business Improvement Group program, as I said before, our focus for this month and next month is to hide your valuables and lock your car. That's our focus to them, to get their customers to do that. Sometimes the folks are a little bit leery about doing that. They don't want to scare away their customers, so we're trying to put it out there as well. Our next meeting will be August 28th for the businesses around 10th and K. We'll meet from 10:30 in the morning to 11:30 in the Stanley Kleiner Building down in Lancaster Park. From our Valley Central Way group will meet from 1 to 2 p.m. over at the Hilton Homewood Suites over on Double Play Way across from the Jethawk Stadium. And our East Avenue J group will meet from 3 to 4 here in City Council chambers. One of the things that we're trying to encourage them to do, in fact, we've invited not only representatives from the Sheriff's Department, but also representatives from private security firms that work in the area to come there. We're really encouraging them to take a look at private security as a nice complement to the Sheriff's Department. Sheriff's Department gets very busy out there. All you have to do is look at their call for service workload. You can see that they're running constantly out there. So a nice complement to that is getting a good private security firm on your property or in your shopping center. We can see the results of that in the shopping center that's east of 10th Street West, south of Avenue K. They've got a private security firm in there. I'll tell you, go sit in any of the restaurants over there and you'll see them driving through every 2 minutes. And it's a nice thing to see, and the part runs in those areas have just plummeted. So that's part of our focus. Thank you.
Okay, and just quickly for the new commission members, I'd like to introduce some of the public safety staff that's here today. Not everyone's here, but just so you know, as you come into City Hall or see them publicly at our events, you'll know they're our staff. Tracy Stewart, stand up, please. Tracy works out of our office here and manages at the office level, and then also works with me on all our outside entity contracts, because that's something we manage out of our office. Josh Wagner. Josh is actually a CSO assigned to the LandCap team, and he handles a lot of quality life issues for us too, as it relates to, he's single-handedly cleaned up all the backlog we had with barking dog complaints and all those things in mediation. He's done a great job. Anne-Marie Mercer. Anne-Marie works directly under Jim, and she works both in the Business Improvement Group program, and also she handles our community youth court. Jennifer Pescara. Jennifer just did a fantastic job putting together our National Night Out event. She coordinates with outside entities that work through our Public Safety Office for community events. Everyone is a part of Neighborhood Watch and Business Watch, and manages and attends those meetings as well. And then Amy Vasquez, poor Amy, we've dumped on her really bad lately, because not only does she manage our restitution and our graffiti tracking and case management system, now she's dealing with chronic nuisance. Okay, we have an ordinance in this city about chronic nuisance and chronic calls for service. We've built a whole new ordinance we're working with the city attorney on, and she'll be managing the caseload for that, so we can attend to that. And then in the back, Anthony Perez. Anthony is one of our public safety specialists. Last year we stole 2 people from code enforcement to come work and try and lessen the burden on the day-to-day patrol response to neighborhood issues and neighborhood blight issues, those type of things, or neighborhood complaints, and those are things those guys manage through the city, and they're doing a heck of a job. So we're just kind of moving forward here. Again, National Night Out was the biggest night we ever had as far as that event. Jen had Rescue 5 from Ground Zero at the World Trade Center out there, center stage on Ehrlich. It's pretty impressive to see that. And then the participation with all the agencies here that provide public safety or interest in public safety in the community, and advocacy agencies as well. We tied that together with our Thursday night farmers market, and the attendance was amazing. It worked out really well. So a thank you to everybody that participated from all these outside agencies to bring resources to that. That was a big deal for us. We're going to continue to focus on our expansion of the Neighborhood Watch program. We're always looking as neighborhoods transition to recruit new members, to keep that program moving forward. Again, we truly still believe that it contributes to issues and the quality of life issues that are in our neighborhoods, so we're going to continue to promote that. We're also kind of reaching out more, and as you can see based on my first presentation today, into that more proactive prevention model. Currently working with Dr. Vieira's staff, and thank you, Dr. Vieira, for bringing all your administrative staff into that meeting that we had to really try and impact these first-time offenders and get that turned around at that just entering that delinquency stage before it becomes some criminality involvement here, to make these youth understand that. And we're doing that on a lot of different levels. We're currently working on a program with D.A. Franklin's office, too, on another program that's going to be implemented through his office for the adult version of that, too, as well. So, again, to to target those individuals that are just starting to turn that behavior into a negative note in our community and get a hold of them and turn that around and make them more contributing, proactive members of our community. So that's our focus for now.
Thank you, Mr. Dorico. Appreciate all that you and your staff do for the city of Lancaster as well. Great job. Public business from the floor, non-agendized items. This portion of the agenda allows an individual the opportunity to address the Criminal Justice Commission on any item not on the agenda. State law prohibits the commission from taking action on items not on the agenda, and your matter will be referred to staff. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes, and we do have one speaker, Mr. David Paul.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, good morning. I wanted to come and support my friend Sheldon Carter. I'll tell you what, this commission has got a lot better looking lately. So thank all. You know, what happens in this room just impresses me every time I come, because we are here to solve problems that are largely unsolvable. When I hear about these need to get the drunk drivers off the road, this kind of stuff drives me crazy, because we have technology available for the last 10 years that would prevent any drunk driver from ever operating a motor vehicle. And there is no public will to do this. So law enforcement has to just do the best they can. And that's where we're always at, isn't it? Just do the best we can. And this community does the best they can, and that inspires me. Now, Mr. Dorico, you talked about this new proactive approach and the difference between getting through to somebody and just having a punitive punishment. You know, my kids, they find it very punitive when they just have to listen to me. So we spend a lot of time talking, and I was thinking, you know, if you could fill this place with juvenile offenders and let them see. This is the thing, the disconnect. I don't understand why people have such a fear of law enforcement when we're all human beings. And when you get to know some of these people, I've seen many of these people that, you know, they look rough, but they're wonderful, kind, decent human beings underneath. And if that could get across on an individual basis to one person, that's where we make a difference. We're not going to block change everything, but it's one person at a time. So if these kids sat here and watched the effort put in by this community to make it a better place despite these impossible odds, if one of those kids wakes up and says, you know what, these people do care. They're here for us. They're fighting for all of us, for all of the community. There is no separation. We are one together. That is the only thing that fixes anything. And I love to come here and watch all of us try to make our community a better place. Thank you. This is inspiring. And I come here for the purpose of being inspired by all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Paul. Appreciate your comments. Commissioner comments. Again, a warm welcome to our new commissioners. I'd be remiss again if I didn't thank those that are leaving us, Mr. Newton-Shillette and who was the other one? Mr. Tim Fuller, on my right, who makes such a huge impact on me. But anyway, seriously, I do thank them for their time being here, and I know that we have a platform, and maybe they can come back at another meeting, and we can publicly recognize them for that. So with that, I thank them, and I turn it over to other commissioners for any comments that they'd like to make.
Mr. Chairman, being a senior citizen that Deputy Ruiz was talking about, and having known you, Mr. Chairman, for over 50 years, Mr. Dorico, Vice Mayor Christ, and I want to say thank you. I look forward to serving on this commission, and I'll drink lots of coffee so we can get through this and just stay diligent. But I look forward to working with everyone here, and thanks again. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, I guess I'd like to say that I've lived here in Antelope Valley for over 20 years, about more so or less, and I welcome the opportunity. I'm very proud, and I feel wonderful about being a part of this commission. So I just want to say thank you all very much.
I'd like to say I'm honored and very much excited about this opportunity. I plan on giving it my all, being as proactive as possible to do what I can for my community. Thank you.
Okay, and I guess I wanted to also thank Dr. Brown and Christie for your service on this commission as well, and glad to have you returning and back as well. So, with all that, this meeting stands adjourned, and we'll meet again on Wednesday, the 10th of September, 10 a.m. Thank you.